Hello, I'm Dr. Tom Horn. I'm your host as ever for the Shindig. We've got a really great podcast for you today. It's with one of our own, Jennifer McCarthy, and she tells us her really interesting story straight from when she started her education and wasn't necessarily going to go into archaeology.
Essentially, based on the timetable, I picked archaeology. I thought it would be grand for a year, maybe I could put up with it. And from the very first archaeology lecture, everything changed.
So it's really interesting that, Jennifer started doing things like applied psychology, social studies, and just did archaeology as something that she thought might be interesting. And then she got the bug.
It's a career that, kind of once you're in it, it just takes you. And I've never even crossed my mind to do anything else.
Jennifer's worked with us for a few years now, but she's still developing.
Some days you might be out digging in the pouring rain, you're soaked to your skin, and then equally the next day you might be in an office writing up a report.
So if you really want to find out how you get into archaeology and how archaeology can really develop you as a person and as a professional, listen to this podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jennifer, because we realise you're very busy. But from what you've told me in the past, that you didn't initially maybe set out to become the sort of excellent field archaeologist that you are today.
No, I didn't. I suppose when I finished school, I undertook an art, craft and design course, and I quickly realised, actually, I hate this. This isn't what I want to do. So second time around, I thought I had a go at psychology, and I liked it. So I was going to run with that, and I was doing that through arts at UCC. So I needed, I was going to do psychology and sociology, and I needed two other subjects to take for the year. So essentially, based on the timetable, I picked archaeology. I thought it would be grand for a year, maybe I could put up with it. And then philosophy equally for the same reason. And from the very first archaeology lecture, everything changed. I hadn't realised it was actually a real career and that people actually get paid for it. So yeah, I undertook a single honours in archaeology and I minored in philosophy. And then I stayed on in the university the year after, and I done a master's in archaeological excavation. So here I am.
And that, so yeah, I think I started off doing history as well, and you end up, I just asked to be on a dig, and then yeah, you get really into it, and you kind of never look back. So I think a lot of people probably listening to this will understand that kind of that journey that's not quite as linear as people might think when you're successful in a career later on. But so what did you learn about that at university in terms of what you needed to be an archaeologist? Because it's one of these rare jobs that sort of combines hard physical work, often in very poor conditions, but also with a lot of sort of critical thinking. Is that how you would describe the job to people?
Yeah, I think it's a strange one, kind of an outlier in the sense of you need to have so many different skill sets. It's kind of like a jack of all trades. As you mentioned, some days you might be out digging in the pouring rain, you're soaked to your skin. Your hole fills back up again and again. You're not getting anywhere. And then equally the next day, you might be in an office writing up a report. So it's very much kind of a whole mix of everything. Which I guess makes it really interesting as well at the same time.
And you've been doing this job now for 6 or 7 years, I understand. What have you been sort of working on the most, or what sort of jobs have you been working on, say, for the last sort of year or so, and then maybe give us an idea of the sort of various types of jobs that you've done with Rubicon Heritage?
Yeah, so I joined Rubicon last February on the M28 Cork Touring Skiddy project, more or less as a supervisor. And then having been on that project for a long enough time, it helped me to get to the next stage of my career, which was becoming a site director. And the M28 project helped me because it was so big, so varied, that I got a really wide range of experience from it. And then from there, I was able to go for my license and sit the competency interview. And then from there, I suppose for the last couple of months, I have just been working on various projects, I suppose, around the country and doing a bit of traveling.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the interview that you had? I think this was the National Monument Service. Tell for people who don't know maybe how it works in Ireland, all the work you had to put in, and yeah, obviously you're seeing projects, huge linear projects like the M28 because they gave you that breadth of experience. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that project and how you became, is it license eligible archaeologist?
Yeah, so I suppose in Ireland, by law, from the National Monuments Act, you can't undertake any excavation in Ireland without a license. And to become license eligible, you essentially need to sit a competency-based interview with the National Monuments and the National Museum of Ireland to be deemed competent, I suppose. And then from there, you just submit a method statement for each project you'd like to undertake and explain how you're going to do it, why you're doing it, and then from there you get granted a license, or maybe not sometimes.
I believe also as well because you've been put up for awards in the past. What was the award you were up for, and you didn't you have to? There was a you did some work in archives. There was a project that you'd worked on. I think that's what I'm getting at.
Oh, so I think that the award you were referring to was it was an early career research award. So
Yeah.
essentially, in 2017, when I was undertaking my master's thesis, there was a large volume of reports uh, that had been published online. Grey literature, essentially, that hadn't been available before from the Celtic Tiger period, had been available free access online by the TII, and I was able to use some of those reports from. I was working. My thesis was based on a road job in Cork, so I was able to compare other road jobs around the country from the reports on the website, and then there was essentially a call or a competition to explain um, how you best used the information, and I suppose yeah, I ended up winning it.
I think a lot of people who listen to our sort of, my career, my life in archaeology sort of podcast, I think they probably want to get an idea of. I always ask my friends, in other fields, what would you do in a sort of typical day or a typical week or a typical month? Because sometimes you've got a job title, but you kind of need to sort of walk through it. So I don't know, with reference to maybe any projects you've worked on in the last couple of years, say what would be maybe a typical week or a month or even a day in terms of your job as a supervisor now as a license eligible archaeologist?
I suppose using the M28 as the freshest example, I suppose a day on the life of that project would involve a daily briefing in the morning, first thing, so that everyone understands what the plan is for the day. And I suppose addressing any health and safety concerns as well before we start. And then excavation gets underway, and I suppose my role would be to supervise the excavation and be on hand to answer any questions, and maybe make some suggestions. And I suppose a large part of excavation on the ground would be checking paperwork, because for every archaeological feature that's excavated on the ground, a paper record is created. and all the paper records need to correlate and match up. Unless when you get off site and you're back in the office, if there's any small mistakes, it might cause big problems down the line. So I suppose always keeping an eye on the paperwork is a big part of it too.
And that's it. The paperwork is being produced by this large team, and I think a lot of people might not realize that team aspect of archaeology. Everybody has to work together, often under very trying conditions. Can you'd say a little bit more about what the team will be doing and how you manage the team, and just in archaeology how it's this that the team ethic is really important.
I suppose I would say all of archaeology is essentially teamwork in some form, but especially on site. You might have 2 or 3 people working on a really trying feature, such as a deep and wide ditch, and it really is all about teamwork to carry everything and move forward.
And I think that's very important. Having worked as a field archaeologist myself, it's you're working cheek by jowl with people, often months at a time, and maybe away from home, and you need to have that camaraderie, which I think you've talked about in the past. But what I suppose my question from that is, what are the other sort of things that you enjoy about archaeology in terms of because I think, as I understand it, sort of community archaeology and heritage is very important to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the best part for me about archaeology is, I suppose nearly every archaeologist probably say it, is when you find stuff, when you find artifacts. It never gets old. It's always like you're the first person to hold something in thousands of years, and it's a feeling that I'm not sure that I've ever felt from something else. But I suppose it's the camaraderie of it too. It's you feel like when you find something, you need to tell everyone about it, and you're just going around showing everyone what you found, and doing your lap of honor, I suppose sometimes. But yeah, I think that's my favorite part, typical of archaeology.
I suppose from that, my next question would be: you talked about findings, but I think my question is finds. What I think people like to hear from an archaeologist, and it's a question that often gets asked. What is your kind of favorite find? But on either before and maybe one also from the M28 project, what's not necessarily maybe the most important thing you find, but the thing that maybe you've, to illustrate your answer, that's something that's maybe told us a little bit more about the past that can help us understand where we are today, or it could just be something that's really shiny and cool. So I mean, it's absolutely just your sort of your favorite or maybe most interesting find.
I suppose I always like to find prehistoric pottery. And we have found a bit of it on the M28. I suppose it's not the shiniest of finds, but I think it tells us a lot about the ordinary person, and everyday life, as opposed to the shiny finds, and the really remarkable special things. And I think as well with pottery anyway, someone has made this with their hands. Sometimes if you're lucky enough, there could be even, I suppose I heard on medieval pottery anyway, there could be even a fingerprint or thumb of the potter. So I think a lot can be learned about the more mundane finds as opposed to the more remarkable ones, as it tells us more about the ordinary person as opposed to the more remarkable stuff.
And now then, I suppose the flip side to this, because we can't have people walking away think archaeology is just a walk in the park finding sort of really interesting things. What are because we're always very honest in these podcasts. What would be maybe the less glamorous aspects of archaeology that you could tell people about?
I suppose the most obvious one that comes to mind is the weather, especially in Ireland where it bloody rains all the time. And sometimes, especially when you're out on site and you just have one of those days where the rain just does not stop, but it's not heavy enough that you have to stand in from it. It's still raining, but it's light enough to be working in it. And when you're digging something, everything is heavier. Everything is just sloppy. It's messy. It's dirty. And sometimes, you bail your pit or your ditch out, the water out, and then 2 hours later it's back in there, and it kind of feels like sometimes 20 steps backwards to get one step forward, and that happens a bit more often than I'd like, I think, but that definitely is part and parcel of it too.
And how many washing machines have you gone through as an archaeologist then?
I always get in trouble. I always have nails in my pocket, and especially at work, you have so many pockets, and you think you've emptied them all, but you haven't. There's always something stuck somewhere, and it always ends up stuck in my washing machine, and I get in a lot of trouble over it. But as the years go on, I think I'm being more careful about it.
You need a metal detector next to your washing machine, perhaps, as we all do, I think, as archaeologists.
Yeah, you'd be amazed what ends up in your pocket. Like, it's not even just nails, but small stones, pebbles. It's just ridiculous amount of things in your pocket.
But I suppose just to end then, what would you say? Would you still, if you went back 6, 7, 8 years to the sort of Jennifer of that time, would you still advise her to have a career in commercial archaeology?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I got into it, I didn't really fully understand that you have to travel a lot of the time for work. And I've done a fair bit of traveling over the years. Pretty much worked in most counties in Ireland. But saying that, I think maybe as you go on in your career, you're not as you're a bit more stationary. But I would do it all over again. I would do the exact same things over again. I think it's a career that, kind of once you're in it, it just takes you. And I've never even crossed my mind to do anything else, even after this time.
And I think that comes across in a lot of the people that we interview. It really is a vocation. It is like a calling, and if it gets its hooks into you, you kind of it's difficult to leave, despite the rain and the mud and the nails. But well, I'm just going to say now, because Jennifer is busy, and we've taken her away from her day job, and I'd just like to say thank you very much on behalf of myself and Rubicon Heritage and Luke for your time, and best of luck with the future.
Thanks for having me.
Well, short but sweet. That was just interesting, and just shows you, what we, I think it's made me think about more. I should be doing more and just trying more things so I can develop my career in the way that Jennifer has been.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because we don't often over the last few episodes get the chance to talk to, I suppose, our own people on the ground that are doing the work for Rubicon and Red River every day. So it's really interesting to kind of get an idea of what she's doing on a day-to-day basis and what it takes to get to where she is, especially for me, again, as an outsider to archaeology, to get to see the groundwork and how people just fall into this job and fall in love with it straight away then.
And an important reminder, I think, for all of us that, check your pockets before you put your archaeology equipment into the machine.
Absolutely. And do you know what's going to be in your pockets? Your phones. Use your phones to subscribe to this podcast. Use your phones to like this on YouTube. Use your phones to share it. Tell your archaeology friends or people who are interested in these kind of podcasts that we're here. We have some great topics coming up. We have some great topics in our back catalogue. So hit that subscribe button to get it straight into your ears every time we have a new release.
And just remains me to say thank you from behalf of Red River Archaeology Group and myself and Luke, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.